I am not sorry for something I didn't do, and I am not sorry for the things I did do.
Mr. O'Neal,
All right.
listen, stop, stop,
All right.
listen to me.
I'm not
going to raise your voice again.
I'm not going to raise my voice again. I'm not.
I will have you removed from this courtroom. I can sentence you without you being present.
Yes, ma'am.
You don't conduct
I
yourself.
understand, Your Honor.
Thank you.
But I will say, I'm sorry for your loss.
There are nights when the silence of a suburban neighborhood does not bring peace. It only hides a nightmare quietly waiting to awaken. On the night of March 18, 2018, in Riverview, Florida, the atmosphere seemed as warm and ordinary as any other Monday night. Neighbors were asleep, children were buried beneath their blankets, and life continued its peaceful rhythm. But inside the house on Baroness Avenue, a door to hell had just been opened. This was not a fictional novel. It was not a scene from a horror movie. This was the chilling record of a tragedy that would forever leave a blood-stained scar on the history of American crime. At exactly 11:43 p.m., the silence was shattered by an emergency call placed to 911. On the other end of the line, there was no calm explanation, no clear words for help. Only the heartbreaking screams of a mother named Kenyatta Barron. She was not calling to save herself. She was on her knees, desperately begging for her life. "I'm sorry, Ronnie." Her trembling voice was swallowed by pure desperation. Then, moments later, a violent sound destroyed every remaining hope, the deafening blast of a shotgun. But the tragedy did not end with that single gunshot. Amid the chaos, the voice of the attacker echoed through the house, deep, aggressive, and terrifying, like a brutal ritual of destruction. Allah Akbar. He was not acting in a moment of uncontrollable rage. He was calmly carrying out one of the most horrific executions ever witnessed. Welcome back to Channel Dark Secrets. If you are fascinated by true crime stories that uncover the darkest corners of human nature, and if you want to join us in searching for the truth behind real-life tragedies, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications right now. Your support is the greatest motivation that allows our team to continue investigating, uncovering, and bringing you more powerful and deeply researched stories in the future. Now, let us return to the blood-soaked scene on Baroness Avenue. After being struck by a shotgun blast, her body severely wounded, Kenyatta was somehow driven forward by one final instinct: the will to survive and the unstoppable strength of a mother's love. She forced herself to run toward a neighbor's porch, hoping the streetlights and the kindness of strangers could protect her. But Ronnie O'Neal III followed close behind, moving like a shadow hunting its prey. This time, he did not use a gun. He attacked her with brutal physical force, fueled by a primitive rage, taking away her final breath in front of the horrified eyes of nearby residents. But the nightmare was not over. The killer returned to the house, where 9-year-old Ron Nivea, completely helpless due to cerebral palsy, lay trapped in her bed, while 8-year-old Ronnie Ivor hid somewhere inside, trembling in fear. Without hesitation, he called 911 and attempted to portray himself as the victim. Then, he poured gasoline and set fire to 5 separate locations inside the home, turning it into a massive cremation chamber, an attempt to erase the evidence and silence his own children forever. As flames roared and toxic smoke filled the house, police finally subdued the attacker outside on the street. Then, they saw something that left them frozen. A small shadow slowly stumbled out of the burning home. It was Ronnie Forth. His intestines had been severely injured by a stab wound. His skin was burned. His eyes were empty and traumatized. And then he spoke the words that would haunt everyone who heard them. "My dad killed my mom." Before we move into the next part, where investigators begin uncovering the horrifying forensic evidence hidden within this case, I have a question for you. What do you think was the most terrifying part of this tragedy? A. The inhuman brutality of a father who turned against his own family. B. The unimaginable fear and helplessness of a mother and children trapped inside a burning home. Leave your answer A or B in the comments below. As the toxic smoke slowly faded into the freezing darkness of the late night, giving way to the dim glow of specialized forensic investigation lights, The house on Baroness Avenue was no longer a home. It had become a gray cemetery of ashes and crime. The chaotic sounds of ambulance sirens, desperate screams, and panic had finally disappeared, leaving behind only a horrifying silence. But within that silence, the evidence began to speak. Silent witnesses that could not lie, could not be manipulated by emotions, and could not be influenced by reckless excuses. Investigators stepped carefully over blackened, still-smoking beams, moving with precision as they began peeling away every layer of evidence, reconstructing the terrifying moments that the killer believed the flames had erased forever. The first horrifying truth emerged from the burned bedroom, where firefighters discovered the body of 9-year-old Ron Nivea. At first, surrounded by the destruction of the fire, investigators hoped the young girl had simply fallen into an eternal sleep from smoke inhalation before the flames reached her. But the results of the autopsy delivered a devastating revelation that shocked even the most experienced investigators. Ron Nivea did not die from smoke or fire. Her lungs showed almost no signs of carbon monoxide exposure. She had already taken her final breath before the flames ever began. The injuries found on her body revealed a horrifying truth. Ronnie O'Neal III had used a wood-cutting axe, repeatedly striking his own daughter with fatal blows to her head and body while she lay in her bed. Ron Nivea had lived with cerebral palsy since childhood, a condition that had taken away her ability to walk and prevented her from calling out for help like other children. In that terrifying moment, she was completely defenseless. She could only lie there and endure the violence of the very person who was supposed to protect her, the father who should have been her shield against every hardship in life. The act of murdering a child who had no ability to defend herself did more than reveal O'Neal's cruelty. It completely destroyed any argument that this was an uncontrollable outburst or a moment of unconscious rage. The investigation did not stop with Ron Nivea's death. Bloodstain pattern analysts began carefully reconstructing every detail of Kenyatta Barron's final moments. By studying the size, shape, and trajectory of the blood droplets left behind on walls and floors, forensic experts were able to read the horrific story written across the crime scene. The widespread spray patterns inside the master bedroom confirmed that Kenyatta had been shot at close range with a shotgun. However, a continuous trail of round-shaped blood drops leading from the bedroom, through the hallway, and toward the front door revealed something even more heartbreaking. Despite suffering life-threatening injuries, Kenyatta had fought with every instinct of a mother desperate to survive. She had tried to escape. The broken smear marks and dragged blood patterns found on the wooden porch of a neighbor's home showed a desperate struggle. She had collapsed, attempting to crawl through the darkness before she was caught. And right there on that porch, forensic investigators discovered the crucial piece of evidence: a bloody footprint clearly imprinted on the concrete. Through technical measurements and detailed analysis of the shoe pattern, experts determined that the bloody footprint matched, down to the smallest detail, the athletic shoes Ronnie O'Neal III was wearing when police arrested him. That single piece of evidence shattered O'Neal's false statements at the police station, where he attempted to claim that he acted only in self-defense, or that he had never left the house during the attack. The precision of forensic science continued exposing the calculated brutality behind the fire. A specialized arson investigation team used advanced equipment and trained detection dogs to examine every part of the burned structure. In fire investigation science, an accidental fire caused by electrical failure typically begins from a single origin point, with flames spreading outward according to predictable patterns. But inside the house on Baroness Avenue, investigators discovered something completely different. There were 5 separate ignition points that had no natural connection to one another. From the master bedroom, to the children's room, to the living room and hallway. At each location, burned debris samples tested positive for gasoline, a powerful accelerant used to intensify fire. This proved that Ronnie O'Neal did not accidentally start the fire during a struggle. He had deliberately carried gasoline throughout the house, pouring it over critical areas and transforming the home into a sealed burning chamber. He wanted the extreme heat to destroy the bodies, erase blood evidence, and most importantly, silence the 2 young children, who were the only living witnesses capable of exposing the murder of their mother. Finally, Beneath the collapsed structure and layers of blackened ash, investigators discovered the weapon used to kill Ron Nivea, a wooden-handled axe, partially burned, but with its steel blade still containing traces of biological material. Through extensive DNA analysis in a forensic laboratory, genetic experts extracted a mixed DNA profile from the axe. The results confirmed that the blade contained not only the blood and DNA of Ron Nivea, the young girl with cerebral palsy, but also DNA belonging to Ronnie Vorf. This evidence delivered a devastating conclusion. O'Neal had not stopped after shooting his wife and murdering his daughter. He had used that same axe to continue attacking his 8-year-old son before eventually stabbing him with a knife. The fact that he changed weapons, from a firearm to an axe and then to a knife, demonstrated that he was not acting blindly or randomly. He was aware of his actions. He was choosing his methods. And he was determined to carry out the crime until the very end. All of this scientific evidence, the bloody footprint on the porch, the 5 gasoline ignition points, the brutal injuries inflicted on a disabled child, and the DNA found on the axe, formed an unbreakable wall of proof. A network of facts so strong that it completely surrounded Ronnie O'Neal III. Every lie, every manipulation, every arrogant attempt to control the narrative. All of it collapsed under the undeniable power of forensic truth. Inside the eerily quiet intensive care unit at Tampa General Hospital, the air was heavy with the sharp scent of antiseptic and the relentless beeping of life support monitors. Beneath a maze of IV lines and layers of white bandages that covered nearly every inch of his small body, Ronnie IV was fighting the most brutal battle of his young life. At just 8 years old, he had suffered injuries almost beyond comprehension. Deep burns scarred his skin after being engulfed by the intense heat of the fire, while a life-threatening stab wound to his abdomen had severely damaged his internal organs. For hours, surgeons and nurses worked without pause, pouring every ounce of their strength into saving him, fighting to pull him back from the edge of death. Ronnie IV's survival was more than a rare medical miracle. It was undeniable proof of an extraordinary will to live, a remarkable resilience, hidden inside the heart of a frightened little boy. When the child's exhausted but clear eyes slowly opened, the first face he saw was that of Special Investigator Mike Blair, the officer who had carried him from the burning wreckage that night. Remarkably, despite unimaginable pain, Ronnie did not scream. He did not panic. Instead, with heartbreaking composure, he looked directly at the detective. When Mike Blair gently asked what had happened inside the house, Ronnie IV began to speak. His voice was weak, barely more than a whisper, after everything he had endured. Yet every word carried the weight of a blade, cutting deeply into the hearts of everyone who heard it. Calmly, the young boy described the horrifying moment his own father cornered him inside the house. He remembered the wild look in his father's eyes. He remembered the gasoline can. He remembered the flames rising around him. And above all, he remembered the chilling words Ronnie O'Neal III spoke just before turning on his own son. "Go into the fire, son." Those words were more than abandonment. They were psychological cruelty in its purest form, the ultimate betrayal by the one person who should have been his greatest protector. Yet from the depths of that betrayal, something extraordinary emerged. The courage of an 8-year-old child. Ronnie refused to surrender to the flames. He used the little strength he had left to crawl through thick, toxic smoke, enduring unimaginable pain with every movement, until he finally reached safety. And with him, he carried the truth that would ultimately destroy every attempt to conceal the crime. While Ronnie fought each day to recover from his physical and emotional wounds, Ronnie O'Neal III was preparing a disturbing new strategy on the other side of the justice system. As criminal proceedings officially began, and prosecutors filed the most serious charges available under Florida law, O'Neal made a decision that shocked the legal community. He flatly rejected the court-appointed attorneys assigned to defend him. Instead, he claimed to be a Moorish citizen, embracing a fringe ideology whose followers falsely argue that they exist outside the jurisdiction of United States law. But beneath those bizarre legal theories was something far more calculated. By representing himself, O'Neal knew he could take direct control of the courtroom. He would gain access to every page of the case file, He would examine every crime scene photograph documenting the deaths of his wife and daughter. And most disturbingly of all, he would earn the legal right to personally cross-examine the witnesses, including the young son who had survived the fire he himself had set. O'Neal intended to turn the courtroom into another grotesque stage where he could continue manipulating, intimidating, and inflicting emotional pain on the people who had somehow survived him. Yet amid the darkness of violence, deception, and calculated cruelty, a profoundly human moment began to shine. Detective Mike Blair, the officer who had carried Ronnie's burned body from the ashes that night, could never forget the look in the boy's eyes. To him, Ronnie Afor was never simply a victim, nor was he merely an important witness whose testimony would help secure a conviction. He was a child who had lost everything, a little boy searching desperately for a place where he could finally feel safe. After many sleepless nights and long conversations with his wife, Danielle Blair, the couple reached a decision that would forever change all of their lives. They chose to open their home and their hearts. They officially began the legal process of adopting Ronnie Afor. It was not an act of temporary sympathy, nor was it driven by professional responsibility. It was a lifelong commitment built on love, sacrifice, and unconditional support. The Blair family welcomed Ronnie into their home. They stood beside him through painful skin graft surgeries. They comforted him through terrifying nightmares that jolted him awake in fear. They remained at his side during hundreds of hours of physical rehabilitation and psychological therapy. Most importantly, they gave him something that had been violently taken away: a real family, a home built on love, protection, dignity, and respect. The adoption of Ronnie Afor by Detective Mike Blair and his family became one of the most powerful symbols of humanity to emerge from this tragedy. It proved that the deepest family bonds are not always created by blood. Sometimes they are built through sacrifice, through protection, through compassion. From the ashes of unimaginable violence and betrayal, Ronnie Afor was not left to face the world alone. Instead, he found a true home, a place where healing could finally begin. And perhaps that became the greatest answer to Ronnie O'Neal's cruelty. Hatred may burn down a house built of brick and wood, but it can never destroy hope. It can never extinguish the human spirit, and it can never overcome the extraordinary power of unconditional love. In June 2021, after more than 3 years of waiting and preparation, the trial of Ronnie O'Neal III officially began in Hillsborough County, Florida. The courtroom was filled with tension, a heavy atmosphere fueled by anger, public outrage, and intense media attention. This was no ordinary criminal trial. It had transformed into a suffocating legal battlefield, where the line between madness and calculated manipulation became increasingly difficult to separate. From the very beginning, O'Neal fully exploited his right to represent himself, turning the defendant's table into a disturbing and chaotic stage. Wearing a suit, he stood before the jury, raised his voice in anger, slammed his hands against the wooden table, and repeatedly interrupted the judge. He portrayed himself as the victim of a massive conspiracy orchestrated by law enforcement. He shamelessly accused his late wife, Kenyatta Barron, of being the one who had violently attacked their children, while claiming that he had only acted to protect his family. His outbursts, psychological manipulation, and fanatical statements created an overwhelming atmosphere inside the courtroom, raising concerns that his arrogance and behavior could interfere with the pursuit of justice. But all of O'Neal's shouting and theatrical performances came crashing down the moment the prosecutor called the most important witness in the entire case. The courtroom doors slowly opened. Ronnie Afor, now 11 years old, walked inside wearing a small but carefully prepared black suit. Although the scars from his burns were still clearly visible across his face and hands, permanent reminders of that horrifying night, his small figure carried an unexpected sense of calm and strength. The entire courtroom fell silent. This was the confrontation America had been waiting for, a direct encounter between a violent killer consumed by his own lies and the young son who had survived the fire of hatred created by his own father. O'Neal stepped away from the defendant's table and slowly approached the witness stand. He intentionally closed the distance between them, using his eyes and his carefully controlled tone to question his own son. He wanted to use the authority of a father to intimidate the child. He wanted to reopen the terrifying memories of that night and disrupt the boy's emotional stability. O'Neal spoke, attempting to create a false sense of affection. "Did I hurt you that day?" The courtroom held its breath. Every eye turned toward the witness stand. But 11-year-old Ronnie Ivor did not look away. He did not tremble. He did not lower his head. Instead, he looked directly into the eyes of the man who had brutally attacked him and murdered his mother. With a calm but powerful voice, the child answered, "Yes, you stabbed me." Refusing to accept defeat after the very first question, O'Neal continued pressing, desperately searching for uncertainty in the child's memory so he could challenge the truth. "Did you actually see me stab you, or do you just think I stabbed you?" The cruel questioning seemed designed to break a child. But Ronnie Ivor responded with remarkable clarity and logic. "I saw you holding the knife. I saw you stab me." O'Neal continued questioning him about the moment the house caught fire, attempting to push the narrative that his deceased wife was responsible for starting the blaze. But against every trap, every manipulative question, and every attempt to distort reality, Ronnie Ivor remained steady. He described exactly what happened. How his father started the fire, how his father cruelly told him to walk into the flames, and how he was forced to save himself. His testimony was not filled with uncontrolled anger or revenge. It was simply the truth. A painful, clear, and undeniable truth. The hours-long confrontation between the killer and his 11-year-old son became the defining moment of the trial. Ronnie Ivor's courage, strength, and honesty completely destroyed O'Neal's false narrative and exposed his manipulation in front of the jury. The dramatic self-defense performance he had carefully constructed for years collapsed in front of the truth spoken by a child. It was more than just courtroom testimony. It was the moment justice found its voice, and that voice was powerful enough to silence cruelty. After the intense and historic confrontation between the killer and his young son, combined with the sharp and powerful arguments presented by the prosecution, the jury officially withdrew to begin deliberations. Outside the courtroom, time seemed to stand still. The entire hall waited in complete silence, counting every passing moment. The tension was not only about waiting for a legal decision, it represented the hopes of millions of people watching the trial, people longing to see evil held accountable, and the truth finally recognized. After only 4 hours of deliberation, an astonishingly short amount of time for such a complex multiple murder case, involving thousands of pages of evidence and records, the jury returned with its final verdict. As the sound of the courtroom hammer echoed through the room, the decision was delivered clearly. Ronnie O'Neal III was found guilty on every charge, including 2 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of attempted first-degree murder, and aggravated arson. It felt as though the entire world had reached a breaking point. But at the bench, Judge Michelle Cisco remained calm and firm. Looking directly at the man standing at the defendant's table, she delivered a statement that carried the anger and pain of both the community and the justice system. Judge Cisco declared that throughout her decades of legal experience, and after facing countless dangerous criminals, this was among the most brutal, inhumane, and disturbing cases she had ever witnessed. The sentence handed down to Ronnie O'Neal III became a final declaration of justice. 3 consecutive life sentences, plus an additional 90 years in prison, with absolutely no possibility of parole or sentence reduction. Every number, every word, every part of the sentence struck down the arrogance, the manipulation, and the courtroom performance that O'Neal had carefully constructed for years. This verdict did not merely place the killer behind prison walls forever, permanently separating him from society. It delivered a powerful message. No matter how calculated the lies, how twisted the manipulation, or how horrifying the cruelty, evil can never permanently hide the truth. As the horrific case on Baroness Avenue finally came to a close, and the prison doors permanently locked behind the murderer, what remained in our minds was not only the pain and horror of such a brutal crime, it was also the deeper lesson about recognizing the warning signs of domestic violence. Extreme violence rarely appears suddenly, like lightning striking from a clear sky. More often, it develops over time, growing from small sparks of obsessive control, psychological manipulation, threats, intimidation, and the uncontrolled escalation of a distorted ego. Many victims of domestic violence endure silently, hoping that patience, forgiveness, or time will eventually change someone. Others remain trapped by fear because of threats and emotional control. But the tragedy in Riverview serves as a devastating warning. Silence and endurance can never be a shield against someone who carries the potential for violence. Recognizing warning signs early, refusing to remain trapped in darkness, and seeking help from authorities, support organizations, or the surrounding community can become the difference between survival and tragedy. The nightmare has ended. The burned remains on Baroness Avenue will eventually be cleared away, but the values of compassion, sacrifice, and extraordinary human resilience will continue shining like a lighthouse through the darkness. We remember and honor the final sacrifice of Kenyatta Barron. In the moment she faced death, despite a body already destroyed by gunfire and unimaginable violence, the instinct of a mother pushed her to use the last strength she had left to run outside and call for help. Not simply to save herself, but in one final desperate attempt to draw the world's attention and create a chance for her children to survive, we remember Ron's Nivea, an innocent and precious child who had already faced countless challenges because of her disability, only to have her life taken away in unimaginable suffering at the hands of her own father. And above all, we honor the extraordinary strength and limitless courage of Ronnie IV. Faced with a tragedy that could have destroyed even the strongest adult, the 8-year-old child did something truly remarkable. He fought bravely in the hospital to reclaim his life from the edge of death. But he did even more. He stood before the world as a voice for the truth. He walked into the courtroom and faced the greatest fear of his life, looking directly at the person who had hurt him, to demand justice for his mother and his sister. His innocent eyes and powerful testimony proved one unforgettable truth. Fear may surround us for a moment, but courage and integrity have the power to last forever. This story does not end with the cold darkness of prison walls or the ashes left behind by hatred. It ends with something far more powerful, a warm reminder of human kindness and hope. The decision by Detective Mike Blair and his family to adopt Ronnie IV was not simply an act of charity. It was a miracle that appeared in the middle of unimaginable tragedy. It became living proof that love can grow and rise stronger, even from the deepest pain and loss. Ronnie IV's new home, a place where he is protected, cared for, and loved unconditionally, became the strongest answer to evil. Cruelty may destroy a house made of bricks and stone. It may take away the people we love. But it can never destroy humanity's ability to believe, to show compassion, and to heal. Justice has been served, and the future of this brave young survivor continues to be written, not with fear and suffering, but with light, peace, and the endless love of those who chose to stand beside him.